I'm working on the first AI nutrition coach. So the vision here is we want to basically put an incredible nutrition coach right in your pocket. Anything that you have to do when it comes to food, we want to make it that simple for you. So thinking about what to eat, when to eat, if you have any kind of dietary conditions or a performance goal or weight loss goal, we just want to make Alma like that trusted companion you can go to ask any questions to do with food and just know that you're going to get really great answers.
For sure. And how's it different from like competitors?
There's basically two buckets of competitors. We don't really think about one of them too much, but I'll tell you both. So one is your kind of traditional nutrition calorie tracking apps that are out there. So think like CaliAI, MyFitnessPal, you name it, Noom. A lot of those apps are very focused on just effectively being like a budget tracker, right? Think of them like you would think of it like an Intuit tax software, right? Sometimes they sprinkle on a little bit of coaching on top, but it's kind of very standard. So that's one bucket we think about. And then the other group is really ChatGPT and Claude and traditional kind of more horizontal AI solutions. That's the other bucket that we think about. We think a lot more about that one than we think about the former. The way we think about those two competitors is almost trying to be, for Alma to be the best nutrition coach, right? It needs to have a sense of what you're eating, right? So it's very important for it to be a really great nutrition tracker, but it's not the core value prop of Alma. It's just a means to the end that we're trying to get to, which is you ask a question and you get incredibly great answers around your food. And this is where, in my opinion, like Claude and ChatGPT and others fall apart, is that sure, you can pop up a thread and ask a question, but it's not going to have great context on exactly how you've been eating all week. It's not going to have a great context on how you've been doing and what your exact goal is right now. I think ChatGPT and Sam will tell you they want to be your coach across everything, your finance coach and your fitness coach and your nutrition coach and your psychologist, and sounds recently like your adult erotica coach as well.
Yep.
But we're not, for us, we strongly believe at Alma that you can build a 10x better experience if you just focus on one of those and just go super deep. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the last year.
How do you normally spend your day?
On Sundays, I plan out the top 3 priorities for the week. So I really try to think about 3 things I'm really trying to push forward on. I write those out. And then what I do throughout every single day is I try to cluster my meetings into groups. So that's often why I might be late like a couple of minutes into calls, because I'm usually like back to back for
that's
3 hours.
That's not because of ADHD, right? It's like that's how you schedule things.
It's literally like I'm back to back, and then I like to have like an hour and a half of focused work, and that's when I push on those 3 things that I'm really trying to push on. Used to be a lot more of me coding and actually jumping into product directly to move something forward. Recently, it's shifted more towards me checking in on specific projects or making sure that a couple of people are getting coordinated or reaching out to specific partners. So a little bit more sales marketing activities over the last couple of months. But yeah, that's kind of how I try to structure it. So.
Cool. So before you start Alma, before you start your first company, actually, so you started 2 companies.
Yeah.
So far, as of today. Before you start your first company, what was your background?
So I studied mechatronics engineering at the University of Waterloo, just robotics engineering effectively, and it was a really fun ride. I spent 4.5 years in that program. So the way that program is structured is you study for 4 months and then you work for 4 months. And pretty much everybody I remember going through that cohort said, wow, work is so much easier than studying. Like the 4 months at Waterloo would be insane. And then you'd go work in a co-op job and like it would be so much easier. But the nice thing about the school program is you get to try a whole bunch of different things. And I realized through that experience that I really like smaller companies. So after graduating, I did a master's. Initially, was kind of debating going down the academic route in the health tech space, but I realized that like the regulatory environment was going to be like really brutal. I like to move a lot faster. I have a couple of personality traits that I've gotten to know pretty well and accept at this stage of my life. One is I'm very curious. The other one is I can be impatient. I like to move fast. So startups are like perfect for me.
Yeah.
Because I find that if you put me in a specific role and just keep me in that role for too long, I'll get bored. And I'll constantly be wondering like what else is going on in the organization. And that's kind of what my professional career ended up being for 2 years before I started my first startup. I would work in engineering and then question like, what's product doing? And what's marketing doing? And what's sales doing? And then the other one is just, I'm just really impatient. I like to move fast. So I don't like a lot of red tape, and I like to just move quickly. So, and that's kind of what got me into startups.
Cool. How did you start your first company, Push?
I had a spreadsheet actually for that. I basically determined a year and a half out before starting Push that I wanted to do a startup.
Was this during like one of your
Yeah, I was
job
working 9 to
as a-
5,
Yeah.
working a nice company at the time, and just really thinking nights and weekends I was just spending it brainstorming different ideas. So I was taking a couple of online entrepreneurship courses, reading a shit ton of Paul Graham's writings, and then really just putting in this Google sheet every single idea I could come up with. And yeah, it was a lot of it was kind of inspired by two things. One, looking at trends that were happening in the tech space that were intriguing to me.
And what year was this?
2012, 2011, 2012. And then the other aspect of it was just looking at real problems I was experiencing. And then kind of usually at the intersection of those two. So I landed on the concept of Push during that search. And it didn't really start with me thinking like, this is it. It was more like, oh, this is cool. And I actually think I could build a prototype and I could totally use this prototype. So let me futz around and see what I can come up with. And that's kind of how Push evolved.
And what is Push?
Yeah, so Push is basically, it was the first wearable tracker trying to focus on the gym. So at the time in 2011, 2012, there was a ton of wearable companies getting launched. A lot of them were focused on step tracking. So Fitbit was obviously the most famous one. This was still early days. Like Fitbit was starting to ship in the hundreds of thousands. It wasn't yet quite at the millions. But I could tell, I'm like, this is going to be really cool. A huge part of the unlock at the time, like this feels intuitive now, but back then it was revolutionary, is to start, at the time in 2011, we were still getting used to this idea of a smartphone, right? And a lot of people were still looking at it like, oh, this is just a phone, and I can email, and I can text on it. But I think people who were working in tech realized like, no, this is a computer that happens to be in your pocket. And it has Bluetooth, and it has abilities to do other things. So I think what was really impressive about Fitbit is they realized pretty quickly with Bluetooth, you can now track steps and you can actually drive behavior change. And I thought that was really cool. I wanted to build something like that for the gym because at that time in my 20s, I was an absolute gym rat. And I had a really hard time, and all my friends had a really hard time of figuring out what kind of training program they should be on. And I just didn't, there's a lot of online programs you could buy, and all of them were fairly templated and basic and not personalized. And I could tell, we look at the gym environment, I'm like, this is kind of like a physics problem. If we start using motion sensors, we could actually help people stay safe, help them train better, feel better, and so on. I've always loved working on things that are in the health and wellness space. I like the idea of doing something that's helping people. And this felt like a thing that I could use that could also help people. And yeah, that's kind of how Push started. I built a prototype nights and weekends. I started tinkering with it. I saw like some early interest, and I just jumped in and made it a startup in 2013.
Nice. And how long did it take you to build Push until you sold it to Whoop?
Yes, it took about 8 years of an absolute grind. It's just hardware companies are hard for a reason. There's a reason I'm doing a software company now. I think hardware startups just take fundamentally a lot longer, right? Because every iteration cycle takes a lot longer. Updates, shipping, and logistics. Getting a product into a user's hand that's not in the same room as you is really challenging. But the good news is once you are out there, and it takes time to prove yourself out, but once you're out there, you have a really great moat around yourself, right? Because you've actually got physical product in people's hands that are using, right? So it took us about 8 years to exit. For what it's worth, like it didn't, the Whoop conversation didn't start with me thinking like, let's exit. It was more of let's find ways to grow the company even further. And at the time, we were very much a B2B company. We had 150 pro teams on the platform, hundreds of high schools, so like roughly about 500 high schools were using our system. And we were growing pretty nicely, like 40% year over year, and had like good traction in that. But I could tell, we had an insane amount of data at that point. We had 50,000 athletes on the platform. We were collecting raw motion data from every single one of their lifts. We had a very unique data set that was very, very valuable. And I could see at the time, and this was around COVID, that there was a real opportunity for us to take this and go consumer with it, because people were buying kettlebells and gym equipment to train at home, but they didn't really have easy access to coaching and guidance. So the conversation with Whoop started with me reaching out to their CPO at the time, Ben Foster, to say, hey, you guys have a great product. It's all about heart rate. What if we license our algorithms and have Whoop now become like a proper strength training tracking as well? And you can be the consumer play, we can stay B2B and kind of just stay focused on that. So that's kind of how the whole thing started.
Wow. Any lessons that you've learned during that 8 years building Push?
Hardware is hard. Be very, very deliberate and careful about when to build hardware. If you can avoid hardware, avoid it. And I don't mean that by like don't build anything that's dependent on hardware, but really critically think about how can you piggyback off of other people's hardware or keep your hardware product as simple as possible. Made a ton of mistakes, but I think one of the good things we did with Push is we kept the hardware super simple. It was out of a constraint. I only raised a couple of $1 million, so I didn't have the budgets that Silicon Valley hardware startups have. I couldn't build a super advanced hardware because I just didn't have the resources for it. But also I realized that there was no way I was going to be able to compete in that game anyways. I was way better off. I realized at the time that we were way better off just focusing on building the best algorithms and the software experience and keeping the hardware super simple. So my best advice and the best lesson is like, keep your hardware as simple as you can, offload as much as you can to the software layer, and then you can always add more features or more hardware perks as your company grows and develops. So that's exactly what we did when we launched Push 2.0 and so on. Other lessons, customer service is your number one focus. I think this applies for software and hardware, but just be absolutely obsessed with your customers. This is something that I'm not sure if I'm just genetically born with or something, but I tend to be very obsessed with users. It really bugs me if a user is unhappy, and I try to really go the extra mile to make sure that they're happy. I also focused a lot in the early days on just making sure that every single user that was using Alma was getting that right level of TLC, and that paid dividends because I still remember a couple of users that we had that were, I remember one user was just flat out like, this product is shit, you guys suck, and I kept working on making him happier to the point where he became one of our best evangelists. So my advice is like, don't take somebody who just says your product sucks and just ignore it. Actually, like try to engage with them, right? And see like, why does it suck? How can I make it better? What is it missing for you? Don't just shut yourself out from that kind of raw feedback that you get. What else? I think the last one is around people and leadership management. I studied engineering. It's not like they teach you anything about leadership. But the good news is there's a ton of great biographies around great leaders, like Shoe Dog by Phil Knight is awesome. There's just a lot of them out there. Andy Grove, I think, from High Output Management from Intel is fantastic. Steve Jobs is another good one. Though I don't actually fully align with like Steve Jobs' leadership style, but I think there's some good lessons there. There's just read as much as you can about leadership and take some key lessons. One of my favorite books about leadership is actually Endurance. Story of Edward Shackleton. He took this giant ship to South Pole and tried to go on this crazy expedition and it failed. But just seeing how they survived as a team in this like really ridiculously tough environment, there's a lot of good lessons for any startup founder to pick up from. So take these books, learn from them, and then there isn't like a one size fit all with people, but you should also be okay and acknowledge that you're not going to nail every single hire. But the quicker you can get to a point where you realize whether they're going to be a good long-term fit or not, the better. Probably the biggest mistakes is sometimes like trying to make something work with someone on the team that just fundamentally wasn't a good fit. And in hindsight, I was doing them a disservice and ourselves a disservice. So just make quick decisions on hiring and try to filter as best as you can early, but don't expect yourself to nail every single hire.
That makes sense. As you mentioned fundraising, so when you were fundraising for Push, were you doing it in Canada mostly, or like did you run into any sort of issues when you were doing that? Yeah,
so I raised the seed round in Canada, raised about 1.3 million Canadian, mostly from the Creative Destruction Lab crew. They used to call them the G7 at the time, which is a bit of an overinflated acronym for the group, but they were just a group of angels out of Toronto that were investing in startups. So I raised that money from them, and then it was backed by BDC, which is Business Development Canada. So they also got involved in supporting it. That was pretty much and then outside of that, I raised convertible debt from Canadian investors. Push was kind of a unique story, I would say. Like I think I definitely tried to pitch US VCs, but the challenge the challenge that I had with Push is I had this vision of building a B2C brand, but I was so inspired by Nike's story that in my head, I wanted to get the best of the best from the pros to use use Push, and then go consumer.
Is it because it's aspirational to
Exactly.
aim for that
Yeah. Like I love the Nike story, right? Of like the best of the best using it, and then consumers, falling in love with it. Sounded great on paper as a story, but executing on it was super, super hard because as soon as you make revenue, people now judge you and assess you and evaluate you on that revenue and that revenue source and the business model supporting it. So Push fundamentally just got pigeonholed into being a B2B brand. There's two reasons this happened. One is because we were generating revenue very early from great names like the Detroit Lions and all these like big names. So investors started thinking of us as a B2B brand. And then number two, when I was ready and I had enough metrics to go pitch a consumer story, wearables were in the absolute like toilet. Like nobody wanted to touch a wearable company. So living through that hype cycle is really, really instructive because I basically raised just around the top of peak wearables. And then by the time I was ready because hardware takes a little bit longer, so it took us roughly about 2 years to show PMF and show decent revenue and show that we're out with a real product. And that's typically the logical point where you want to raise your Series A. Wearables were in the absolute like toilet. Like nobody wanted to touch a wearable company. All the articles I remember in the New York Times were about how people are just abandoning wearables and how they're just sitting there collecting dust and nobody's using them. And so it became really, really challenging to raise additional rounds. So those two reasons ended up really forcing us to kind of survive off of the market that we had, which was B2B at the time.
Cool. So you sold Push.
Yeah.
You ended up at Whoop as
Yeah.
VP of product for a little bit. How was your time at Whoop?
It was good. I think as a founder, like I knew before I even joined, as soon as I signed the paperwork with Whoop, I knew that like this is not going to be, like, I'm going to go back. I remember telling one of my best friends, I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to do another startup. So I knew very early that this is not going to be this long-term engagement. So I just focused every day while I was showing up to just make sure that I'm delivering on the commitment that I gave, right? So watch out for the team at Push, watch out for the customers, and watch out for Whoop, making sure they got the right value out of the commitment. So those are like the three priorities I woke up with every single day. So it was an okay year. I learned a lot. There's definitely some smart people there. But also I realized 1,000 people plus organization carries its own level of inertia and challenges and so on. So it wasn't going to be like a long-term home for me.
Makes sense. And did you quit Whoop when you had an idea, or you just kind of like did it because you wanted to go explore something?
Yeah. I wrapped up late 22 and I wanted to take time off. Like I honestly, in an ideal world, I would have loved to take like an extended period off between Push and Whoop, but I didn't have that luxury. So I remember signing the paperwork and having it finalized on Friday. Not even Saturday. We signed it, and on Monday, I had to make a public announcement and start on Monday. So I had effectively a break between the two. So imagine like you're running a startup through COVID, all the trials and tribulations, and you've had to let your entire team know and everything, and then start everyty on Monday.
So you had like one Sunday to kind of
collect like
yourself.
Breathe, collect myself and jump in. So, and I pretty much took no time off in that first year. I was just like really heads down supporting everything. So I didn't really have time. So as soon as I felt like, okay, we're in a good spot, let's just like go our separate ways, and then let's just take some time off, go camping. I did a bunch of like really nice camping trips, traveled to the Middle East, went to Dubai, saw some family. That's where I grew up. And then, just kind of took some time off. I knew I didn't want to jump into a startup right away. I wanted to explore a couple of different things. So 23 for me was like a bit of a gap here where I was really advising some founders, doing a little bit of angel, looking at different ideas. And of course, like ChatGPT launched late 22. So I was just obsessed with this new technology. And that's when, late 23 is when you and I met up and we got to know each other. At the time, I was just so hooked on this new technology. Didn't last as long as I hoped. And I remember my wife telling me that year, like, for somebody who's supposed to be on a sabbatical year, you're really doing a shit job of relaxing.
That's great. So ChatGPT got you started tinkering with AI, right? Do you remember, like, at the time, what were some of the things you were building, kind of like toy projects or prototypes?
Yeah. So it was like Copilot was the aha moment for me. So I remember reading about GPT-2 when it first dropped, and obviously the AlphaGo story, and like I knew something was happening in ML, but ultimately I was in hardware, I was in wearables, like it was a little bit still kind of far away from what I was doing day to day. I I remember when Copilot dropped and I tinkered with it in August of 22, I immediately went to the VP of software at Whoop and I'm like, you really got to pay attention to this thing. Like, this is pretty damn impressive. I remember we tinkered with it a little bit. It was kind of cool. And then a few months later, ChatGPT dropped and I was absolutely hooked. Like, I would be going on a long drive and I wanted to use it so badly that I would get my wife to just like text it questions.
You would tell your wife to like what
Yeah,
to put in the
yeah,
phone.
yeah. They didn't have voice mode at the time, so I'm like, can you please ask it this while I'm driving, so I kind of get a sense of what it's doing. So I immediately wanted to like tinker and figure out like what is it capable of, what is it not capable of, what are the limitations. And then as soon as ChatGPT Pro came out, I was one of those like shut up and take my money moment, like sign up, credit card, boom. As soon as I launched a platform with an API, I immediately signed up and started tinkering. Early prototypes were pretty basic. Like I just wanted to see what is this capable of. So a lot of it was testing the boundaries, like how good is it at math? What can it do with text generation? How good is it in Arabic and other languages, right? So every time they would drop a new API update, I would try to tinker with the new technology and see what's possible. I think the very first kind of project I tinkered with was trying to build this. It was basically I tried to feed it scripts and documents from like legal text and see if it can kind of give legal advice effectively. I thought, oh, there could be something interesting there. Another experiment I remember is I exported all my 23andMe data and I tried to feed it like snippets of my genetic sequence, my DNA, to see like what could it find out about my genetics that could be interesting. Same thing with like blood test results. And I just started immediately thinking about like, what can I do with this in the health context that could be like really interesting? So a lot of my prototypes were focused on that. And then I did a little bit of tinkering with climate related topics as well. Like thinking about, could it be used as an education tool for climate change, or could it be used for analyzing like a home's kind of risk profile from floods, like by passing it some GIS data and so on. You know, you learn pretty quickly what it's good at and what's not. But one use case that immediately popped up for me, and I just kept kind of evolving the prototype as the technology evolved, was nutrition. Because pretty early I could tell from like looking on Reddit and my own use cases that it's really good at analyzing food and giving really interesting insights of food, which is not surprising in hindsight because so much of the internet is about food, right? So, yeah.
Cool. So that was like the genesis for Alma,
Yeah.
as it is today. So the second time around, you also did a venture, kind of like venture-backed
Yeah.
startup. What is it like? How is it like the second time around compared to the first time?
You know, still putting in crazy hours, so it's not like it gets easier from that. But I think you have the confidence to be okay with mistakes and recognizing the challenges that are ahead. Like I think it's kind of like doing a 5K for the first time. You know, when you do it for the first time, and you and I have run together, right? The first time is like, holy crap, 5,000 meters. Like, how am I even going to get there? When does it even end? You're constantly battling your mind to try to appreciate the end. But once you do it once, it feels, even though you know, like, well, 5K gets easier over time, but like fundamentally, like, it's a distance. You kind of know what your body's going to feel at different stages of the run, right? And it's the same thing with startups. Like I just kind of know, like, yeah, year one, I'm probably going to go crazy, but I'm going to feel fatigued around this point. I should recharge. I can push really hard, but I know how to dial in my energy balance a lot better, right? You know, those are those things that get easier. But the reality is, like, this startup is in a brand new domain.
During this time, you went through the fellowship program at Menlo Ventures. What was that like?
Yeah. So I basically, I don't remember. So we got connected with the Menlo team, joined as a fellow. The Menlo, now they call it the Menlo Inception program. But effectively, it's a closed Slack community group network of people that are interested in doing a startup that Menlo sees potential fit. So it often ends up being like senior product people at bigger companies or ex-founders. And basically, it was kind of like a no-brainer. We got a chance to connect with some really smart people. So I joined that group. And then as part of that, you get to connect with some of the partners. So I was catching up with their consumer partner, Sean Carolan at the time. And we hopped on a call and we were just jamming. I was wearing my Aura ring. He was wearing his Aura ring. And we were just kind of talking health and wellness. And I immediately told him, I'm like, he was asking me about like different things that I'm kind of thinking about. And I immediately told him about nutrition. It wasn't really like, hey, I have this idea. It was more of like, man, these LLMs are really good at nutrition. Like, I think there's a really cool opportunity here to build like a nutrition coach in your pocket versus all these other apps like MyFitnessPal that I've used. And Sean's eyes lit up. Turns out they're internally been thinking about the same thing and realizing that there's real potential for building something that's 10x better than MyFitnessPal. And yeah, so I think that kind of initial meeting, he asked me if I had any prototypes. I showed him a couple of prototypes that I was building. He really liked them. And we pretty quickly could tell like, okay, there's something cool here. And then that's when they invited me to join as an EIR. So entrepreneur in residence at Menlo Ventures basically meant roughly they 4 to 6 months. I ended up having it just be 4 months, but it's effectively like a concentrated period where you get to work very closely with the partners and the team in-house. They have a couple of great people on staff that support you and just basically really focused on refining the idea, doing a lot of competitive intel, understanding the market opportunity, the positioning, and then just really, really pushing hard on validating the concept. And as soon as you get to that stage, you go up in front of an investment committee with a pitch. You effectively pitch the idea, and if they like it, they green light it, and you're off to the races. So that all kind of played out in the first half of 2024. I recruited my co-founder at the time, Adam, who's our head of design, and he joined, and yeah, he jumped in pretty early, and then we got funded in September, and then just hit the ground running to build towards where we're at now.
And you were like flying back and forth between Canada and San Francisco.
Yeah, Canada and SF. Yeah. I think raising VC for consumer in Canada is super challenging. So I don't think like this kind of organically played out the way it did. I didn't like intentionally try to raise from VC in the States, but kind of in hindsight, looking at it, like if you are going to do something in the consumer AI space, there's just not a lot of great VCs in Canada that'll back you and will be able to go the distance, more importantly.
So why do you think that VCs in Canada doesn't have that appetite for that kind of startup?
We have a real problem, in my opinion, in Canada. We seem to be absolutely obsessed with one category, B2B SaaS. And every VC and everybody that I talk to in the investor space will pretty much automatically dismiss anything else. And every founder I talk to feels like they have to pigeonhole themselves into a B2B play in order to be fundable in Canada, which is a real shame. Because when I think about Canada as a brand, right? Like when I travel globally, we're kind of known as like great, nice people and maple syrup. I would love for us to be known for some iconic brands like Spotify. I think our best, most known brand, if you're at all in the tech scene, is Shopify, which is still kind of B2B to SaaS, right? And I just daydream about the day where Alma could be like known for some really, really great B2C companies, right? Like I think we have a couple of nice ones, like Hopper is an interesting one out of Montreal, but we don't have, in my opinion, the same kind of like level of weight when it comes to consumers. So yeah, it's just really, really challenging. And I hope it changes. I think consumer AI is such an important space, and we should have some like hallmark brands come out of this country that we can kind of hang our hat on. Have some cool caps to wear from.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I can't think of a consumer brand that in software that came from Canada.
Yeah, we have some other great consumer brands like Lululemon. It's phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
World renowned.
But not software.
But not software, like not tech. Yeah. And I think for AI, like everybody keeps talking about the application layer. Like, well, shit. Like you want to have big impact in the application layer. It needs to be consumer, right?
Yeah, and going back to your point about VCs in Canada not looking at anything other than B2B SaaS.
Yeah.
It seems like they're not, backing companies that are doing apply AI that are in that space.
No, they're not. Yeah, they're not that I'm aware of. Like I'm not seeing anything, and it's a shame because I think there's some really great research talent. I think if you pair up, and we have great like design talent. Like you look at Montreal and you can pretty much like just open any door, random office door, and you'll find a great designer. Like we have all the key ingredients. We have great marketers. We have great designers. We have a pretty sizable market, and we have a great international brand as a country. So I think we can go and like I don't see why we can't build a Spotify here. You know what I mean? And I would love to see Netflix, Spotify. If you think about the most powerful companies in the US right now, like the big ones that really, everybody watches out for, the ones that love to have them in their portfolio, like Amazon, Facebook, Meta, right? They're all consumer brands fundamentally, right? And I'd love to have some big names like that come out of here.
I agree. So in terms of like using AI to build products, because that's what people should be doing nowadays,
Yeah.
like period. What are some of the tools that you use every day to build your product?
Yeah, honestly, like nothing that anybody who's in the game knows. There isn't any kind of like magic sauce. I would say for us, I personally love Claude Code. I use it religiously.
We talked like a couple months ago and you said Cursor. So now you changed your mind.
Yeah, I'm a Claude Code kind of guy now. Yeah, absolutely. I think Cursor, honestly, Cursor, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if you saw that chart recently with Lovable and no?
No.
There's this crazy chart that popped up recently showing you like the revenue, but also like retention of all these major coding platforms. And some like Replit are just kind of nice and solid and growing, right? But then you look at Lovable where it just had this like meteoric rise and it's just kind of crashing down. I think these companies are getting caught in a weird spot. I'm guessing part of it is some of the foundation model layer companies trying to move up the stack and eat a bit of the application.
Take over the harnessing part of the model. Yeah.
And then I think some mismanagement internally. But Cursor really just kind of pisses me off now. Like I use it, but I'm trying to get off of it. I'm using Windsurf more and I'm using others more. I'm just finding with Cursor that between their constant updates, between their kind of opaque pricing structure, it's just starting to feel less and less like a compelling product to use. And for me right now, because I'm doing also less coding, I'm finding my favorite use case for Claude Code is actually hooking it up to Supabase MCP and just chatting with our data. So I do a ton of that where if I have a specific question or product decision to make or even a marketing decision, I'll often lean on the data and I'll just chat with Supabase. I have tried to use Supabase's own built-in AI bot, but it's such a hot mess that it's pretty much just not usable. That I often end up just leaning on Supabase MCP.
Yeah, I think people are just starting to realize that people are using Claude Code not just for coding anymore, and they're using it for like go-to-market automation and chatting with your own data used through like MCP layer.
Yep.
And I think I don't know if you tried like the Claude Code SDK, which now they branded as Claude Agent SDK.
Yeah.
But essentially, I did some consulting recently where companies would use Claude Code as one of their agent loop in their product instead of like as end users.
Okay.
So you can run it headlessly, and then you can run it in a sandbox. And then these companies are banking on the fact that Anthropic is gonna build that part as best as they can, and it's not their bread and butter, so they might as well just outsource it to Claude Code being one of their agent loops.
That's really cool. Wow. Yeah. I want to hear more about that. I think for us right now on the agent side, we're kind of finally going through this migration from a ton of advanced prompt chains and kind of a lot of business logic kind of holding the system together into pushing more towards agentic flows. The agent framework that we're using is Pydantic AI. I'm a huge fan of that company. I think they're doing such great work.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're just kind of implementing that internally. In terms of my own stack, it's a lot of Claude Code. I use Claude Code exactly the way you described. So I have a repo called Alma Growth, and it's just all my growth hacking experiments. So I have a ton of Apify, kind of TikTok scrapers, and you name it, kind of different experiments. I built a little bot to kind of within Claude Code that's got a bunch of advanced scripts that can help me quickly like triage and understand how our app store ads doing. So all the iOS app store, there's an API. I pull the keywords that are working and I quickly can audit and change and then just push it right back. So there's a lot of these kinds of automations. I started using a little bit for copy generation as well the other day, which is kind of cool. I think 4.5 is actually pretty solid at doing copy. So it's kind of nice to be able to just have an MD file and it just generates a bunch of different things that you can feed into Reddit ads or whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, my friend Suk, what he does is he has a folder full of like articles and LinkedIn posts he had written before.
Yeah.
And he uses Cursor, but essentially whenever he writes the next piece, he pulls all those old articles into the context in Cursor and then write it in Cursor.
Nice. That's a great way to dial in your copy, actually. That's fantastic. It's actually amazing. Like, there's some basic things that I maybe part of it is just my naivety, but like social analytics, being able to get like a quick. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I would actually love to know, is there an Instagram MCP or something like that, right? Like, could I just understand how our engagement rate is going week in, week out? we've got 10 creators now. A very popular strategy in consumers to bring on creators, right? So we've got 10 creators. We're going to be scaling this program up aggressively. I want to create like a very simple way to evaluate like which creators are doing well and which ones are not. And right now we're literally having to go manually into each one, review all their new videos, look at the views, understand the quality. Like it's just very time consuming.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to see something better.
Somebody needs to build like the layer that uses web automation to do all that, and then abstract that under like behind like an MCP, and then you can use it.
Yep, exactly. Apify just recently launched an MCP. I'm very excited to try it. Apify is a kind of a badass company. They've got all these like really interesting bots that you can use to scrape content.
What is Apify?
Apify is basically literally, it's in the name. They just try to create APIs for things that really don't have APIs. So I've used it to, for example, scrape TikTok influencers that are trending. Mm-hmm. So you can see ones that are about to kind of hit explosive growth before they do by looking at their stats. So they have like a really easy API that somebody built on Apify that you can just pay for, and you'll get access to, and you can just kind of scrape TikTok content. They have ones for Reddit, they have ones for Instagram, and so on and so on. So these platforms that usually don't let you scrape, Apify through this store concept they have lets you do it. So they've just announced this week they have an MCP. So I'm really excited to see like, could I hook up the MCP and directly start tapping into different APIs based on the problem that I'm trying to solve for.
Yeah. So one day I guess we'll talk about the problem of having too many MCP servers and flooding the context window with all the resources and tools available. But one point we talked about your development team, and I think there were a few senior developers that you worked with who were quite against like using AI tooling for coding, and that ended up not working out with the person. So like, what are your thoughts on that? Like sometimes developers aren't too keen on using AI tools to code.
Yeah. The space is moving so quickly that I think if you were an arrogant senior dev 5 months ago that was saying that, you cannot possibly still have a job or be functional in this space and still say the same thing now. Like, I think it's one of those where usually like time proves things out, right? Like everything is clear in hindsight. But I think in this case, time is almost compressed. We're on this exponential curve in tech, and Claude 3.5 to like 4.5, it's just like there's leaps and bounds of progress that's been made, right? And you can feel it objectively when you use it. So, even some of the senior devs that I used to talk to that were kind of, passively or passive-aggressively shit-talking LLMs have kind of come around now and realized like this is something I just need to get comfortable with. I personally, from very early, I could tell, I'm like the best frame of reference for using AI coding agents is to think of them like junior devs. That was very obvious to me very early. And I think the problem that these senior devs had was, I can't trust these AI agents. Well, like, yeah, you can't trust a junior dev either, but like if you're scaling an organization, you can't be coding everything, right? So if you can't be coding everything and you have to rely on other engineers, you have to build mechanisms to let you evaluate, right? But you can't just be like, no, I'm going to code everything. That's never going to scale. Like in real life before AI even came into the picture, that was never going to scale. So I think that's what a lot of them are realizing now. I think the scary part, to be honest, for everybody here is if we've gotten this far in the last 9 months, where are we going to be in 12 months? I think we're going to get to a point where, self-healing code bases are not that far off, in my opinion. I think about our own, like right now we have this process every single day. We look at our GCP instance, we look at our prod logs, we look at all the errors, and we literally just filter for all the errors and warnings. We feed them all into one Claude call. We have it triage based on the sequence of errors into like the highest frequency ones. And one of our engineers shares it on Slack, and we all look at it. Like, here's how many times this error happened. Here's what Claude Code thinks is the issue. And then we just decide, like, these are we're going to ignore, we're going to keep an eye on, these we're going to focus on, let's create tickets. And then the job of our engineers is to basically, we put our hands up. I put my hand up sometimes, and I'll say, like, okay, I'm going to go look into this one. And then I work with Claude Code to investigate, right? But like, I don't think it's that far out in the future to have a situation where that process is 99% automated, and I'm waking up every morning with, a stack of inboxes saying, hey, Claude Code pushed a PR to fix this thing. It dug into the code base and it thinks this is where this error is happening, and here's how to fix it, right? This is not like science fiction. This is like 6 to 8 months away max, right? So yeah, we're gonna get to a point very, very soon where just building product is gonna be super fast and maintaining code base is gonna be super fast.
I agree. I think until the day comes, we need to find a way to put enough context about the code base and the product
Yep.
and what you care about from those logs inside the code base so that, like LLMs, I feel like can already do that. It's just that there's no way for it to get enough context unless you talk to it. That's why you didn't just tell Cloud Code or Devin to just go and create a PR right away. You have to work on it yourself plus Cloud Code because then it's easier for you to give it context.
Yep.
But one day maybe you can codify that through like call transcripts or something like that, and then everything is there for the agent to just go off and do its own thing.
Yeah. I'm curious, since you've been looking at Agent SDK, is there a world where right now I can have like an instance running where maybe it gets triggered by an error log from a prod instance, right? And then it can go and have access to a code base or a repo and investigate? Is that possible, you think? I haven't looked into Agent SDK, yeah.
Yeah, you can have, you can create these things called hooks with Cloud Code. You can also trigger Cloud Code using GitHub Actions and your CI systems. So like when something happens, you emit an event, so you just be like, okay, spin out another one, and then like go and fix it.
Yep.
So for Cloud Code, you need to manage your own sandbox for the agent, which is a little bit tricky. For Codex, OpenAI has its own infrastructure, its own sandbox, so you can programmatically trigger a new Codex instance to just be like, okay, these are all the logs that happen. Just go and into your sandbox, and once you're done, make a PR, and it can run for like half an hour, half a day.
Nice.
Yeah. Saw it firsthand at Dev Day. So
Codex CLI. Yeah. I saw they posted a demo about it. I want to play around with it and see what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking forward to into the future, where do you see the industry going, and in terms of like agents?
Yeah, I think I posed this question on LinkedIn the other day, just trying to reflect on what happens as the cost of intelligence kind of drops, right? And to me, I think the big thing that's going through my mind is just the importance of brand and taste, and what are you putting out there in the world. I honestly think the best analogy for this is like cooking and chefs, right? Like, regardless of how easy it is to cook at home and how much easier it gets with all the crazy technology we have now, like Instapot and air fryers and whatnot, you will still pay premium to go to a really great restaurant to have a delicious meal. But what do you value in those cases? You value the aesthetic, you value the experience, you value the intentionality, you value the storytelling, right? You value the function, the value of like how healthy is this meal, how good for it is it, how good for me is it, right? And I think the same thing is going to happen with like product in general. So when I think about agents, I don't necessarily think about like agents. I think more about like utility for the users, right? Like, and for me, the barrier for competition is going to drop even sharper, and there's going to be a flood of different solutions and options for users out there. Your job as somebody building an AI is to really think about how are you delivering this like really tasteful experience, this really curated experience. There's almost a bit of a danger, to be honest, I think, in how easy it is to ship features now. Like if I put my head down and the team, we can ship 6 features next week. Well, it's not impossible, right? It's totally doable. But the question is like, how thoughtfully integrated will they be? How cohesive? Can we realistically communicate 6 features to a consumer audience in a way that makes sense, right? Maybe B2B companies can get away with it because they have sales reps, but I think there's just fundamental inertia around launching features that are outside of the coding part that we're all going to have to contend with and just be really thoughtful about. In terms of agents, I'm super excited about Pydantic AI. Again, we're just kind of now, maybe we're a little bit late to the party, but I do feel like I didn't really find a single compelling solution earlier in the year to do agents. We looked at Crew AI, we looked at a couple of options, but I think Pydantic AI is going to unlock some really interesting things for us. But the one really interesting takeaway from spending the last 6 weeks working on agentic frameworks is that it's not a catch-all. Maybe if you're working in like non-latency sensitive cases, it is a catch-all. But for us, because speed really matters, there's actually still real value in like purpose-built prompt chaining solutions that are really, really geared to a specific use case. So we're not actually kind of completely like ditching everything and creating like one single agent for Alma. We have a cohort of agents that we're introducing to tackle specific problems, but we're keeping a good chunk of our prompt chaining approach to solve one core user experience that we think is actually better without agents.
The, debate between building a workflow versus an agent. But workflow is much easier to, set a standard for, and then easier to track metrics and performance compared to an agent. An agent has too many use cases. But
Exactly.
Workflow is, as long as it's like completes the workflow and spits out the right value, then it should be fine.
Yeah, in tech in general, like you want to be careful not to hop on every single bandwagon. Like there's always new stuff coming up, and you just have to be deliberate and intentional about what are you adding, what are you not adding, for sure.
Yeah, it always goes back to the end user.
Yep.
So OpenAI's App SDK, is that something that you'll be exploring, or something you're excited about at all?
It's funny. I'm a part of this like consumer builder chat group with a bunch of consumer builders in Canada, and we had this interesting chat about it. We had one founder that's had pretty good success of using ChatGPT as a channel to their app, but then the rest of the group was talking about how like watch out, OpenAI is pretty ruthless, right? They see any meaningful traction with your app and see that users are gravitating towards it, and they will try to completely cannibalize it themselves. So I am cautiously approaching it. I don't think we need to do it right away. There's cheaper ways that you can get ChatGPT to become a growth engine for you. The simplest one is just focus on getting really good traction on Reddit and focus on optimizing your page, your website. You can even build like custom unlisted landing pages that are really geared for LLM bots to scan. And then you can get ChatGPT to drive traffic towards your app without you having to spend a bunch of time investing into OpenAI's ecosystem. I'm just very cautious about OpenAI. I think for the bigger companies, it's okay. But I think if you're a small startup, there's a decent chance that they'll just kind of take over whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and doing that in plain daylight too.
Yep, ruthlessly.
So this is the last segment of the interview. So what one advice would you give to a first-time founder?
Do something that you're very excited about, and don't do something for investors, and don't do something just to build something. Really make sure that you're actually waking up in the morning and excited about the idea. I think that's the most important thing, because startup, no matter how easy it gets or how lucky you get, it's still going to involve you getting punched in the face more often than not. So you need to make sure that when you wake up the next morning after getting punched in the face, that you're still ready to kind of jump back in the ring, and nothing is going to make it easier than if you're just fundamentally excited about the idea.
What's one advice would you give to a second-time founder?
Second-time founder. To a second-time founder? I don't think second-time founder. What would second-time founders really care to hear? It would be more of a challenge than an advice. I would say do something different. Try to use it as an opportunity for growth and exploring a new space, and don't just lean too much into the comfort of a space that you know very, very well. I think that's kind of it. It's part of the reason I didn't want to do another hardware company. I kind of wanted to just see, I've talked to a whole bunch of consumer app builders, and I know that it's a very, very tough thing to do. And I just wanted to try something totally different. And that's kind of part of the idea. The domain, the reason it's in the same domain, health and wellness, is just because I'm deeply passionate about the domain, but totally different kind of stack and totally different format. And yeah, learning a ton in the process. For me, as long as I'm waking up every morning feeling I'm doing something good for the world, and I'm doing something that I'm actually really learning out of, that keeps me fueled pretty well. So
makes sense. So last question, spend some time advising companies on their product during your time wandering between when you left Whoop and starting Alma. What are some of the things that you notice consistently in those companies?
I think too many founders work back from the pitch deck for investors. Like the number of times I've talked to founders that were just trying to reject their story just to focus on raising capital. It was way too many times. And you could tell that they weren't even convinced by it at times. And I think that's the worst thing that you could do.
So changing your own story narrative to fit an investor's view of the world.
Yeah, because the reality is it should be the other way around. Think of it like dating, right? Like you don't want to be going out there and changing your personality to every single potential possible partner that you're going to have in the world, right? You're going to go crazy doing it, right? You're better off just holding firm to at least some core principles, still being willing to take some feedback, right? But not just relying exclusively on the outside world to kind of give you validation on what you're doing. You need to have like internal conviction of it.
Conviction. There.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And that's it. That's the pot.
It's my pleasure. No, it was good, man. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely.